Hi and welcome back to another video. Now, not too long ago I made a video about this device here, HDMI video capture USB stick, effectively the cheapest capture device I could find on Amazon. Cost £7.39, and if you want to have a look and see how this performed and if it did the job, then click on the link below, look at my channel, and it's one of the most recent videos actually. So it's a bit of a spoiler alert, it kind of half did the job on various consoles and didn't really do the job on some other consoles. So another thing that I had in the background, knowing after I bought that, is back a few months ago I backed my first ever Kickstarter project, which was for this, which has now turned up. Now we're in May. It's the Shadowcast. Now this is made by Human Things. It's actually called the Genki Shadowcast, bit of a weird name. Effectively, it's another USB stick. I'm going to show you some footage now of the box and everything you get in there, and just to explain it a little bit. Now, effectively, this is just another USB stick with a HDMI port or input. You plug the stick into the console itself, and then run a cable USB-C into your PC, into your laptop. Effectively, the marketing was now play your console games from your laptop, kind of sitting wherever you want. If you haven't got a TV to hand or someone else is using the TV, that was kind of its main selling point. But it's also got a selling point of video capture, being the cheapest sort of good capture card that you can find. Effectively, it's also got capabilities to hide itself as a webcam, so if you want to put this onto Microsoft Teams or Skype and play with other people via that way, it's kind of a unique selling point, to be honest with you. Now, technically it's supposed to input 4K up to 30 frames per second and 1080p up to 60 frames per second, and then output as a maximum resolution 1080p, and it says 60 frames per second. I'm not actually going to test that, but I know, looking around the internet, that it actually only outputs to 30 frames per second, so it's a bit of a shady thing they've done there. Whilst on the screen it will say it's 60 frames per second, if you do any testing it's actually only coming out at 30 frames per second, so that is something to bear in mind. Now, this is cheap. Obviously, if you're looking at more lavish, well-known capture cards, you're going to be looking at over £100, £150, £200. Some of them are really expensive. Now, this only cost, I think, all in with shipping from America or wherever it came from, around £50, I think. I had to pay it in dollars, so there's obviously the conversion there, so roughly about £50. So actually, part of the marketing for this is effectively designed for a Switch console and also PS5. They strangely threw into their marketing. I'm not sure why they chose the PS5. I think perhaps because it was the best selling console through the time of the marketing for this. I wouldn't recommend putting it through a PS4 because, again, you're only going to be outputting at 30 frames per second. And I know that even some Switch games run at 60, or a lot of Switch games run at 60, so a bit dubious there to be using this for that. But what I'm going to do is run it through my series of consoles, old consoles. So I've got the PS3, the Wii and N64 that run through a HDMI converter, and also the Wii U. And I want to see how well this performs. They have their own software, which I'm going to test out, the Genki Arcade app. And I'm also probably going to look at running it through OBS, just because that is the more known freeware version of capturing video. So let's get into some of the gameplay, let's get into some of the testing and see what this thing can do. And then we'll wrap up at the end with my conclusions. Okay, so this is where we run into our first problem, and it's with the Genki app. So we're going to download the app. I've already downloaded it, but here I'm showing you the Windows version 1.2. 0.0. There's also a Chrome version and Mac version. Now, if you have Chrome or use Chrome, or if you're a Mac user, you're not going to face this issue. But the issue you're going to face if you're using Windows 1.2 is that you can't save your video. So this is what the actual software looks like. In the top left there with the settings, you've got your mode, so performance or resolution. Seems fine, so I assume that's 720 and 1080p, and a volume controller there. Now the issue we're facing is there's no button you can see to save your video, save your recording. There's no stream button, there's no record button, there's nothing. It's literally those two very basic settings that even those aren't well described. So that leads us to our problem of how the hell are we supposed to record this stuff, this capture device. How is it supposed to capture? In the advertising it says that it should, that is part of what you're buying is software to capture it, quick and easy software, basic software. Unfortunately, it doesn't do that, so the only thing I could think of is, well, obviously you could use OBS, which we'll look at later, but let's use screen capture software whilst using the Genki app, arcade app, because when you do boot up the arcade app, it does display your console, as I'll show you here. So you open the app, obviously it needs to be plugged in to your console and then plugged into your PC or your laptop, and it will load for a second, and then at some stage your device will kick in, and it doesn't take very long until you'll see your screen. So here you can see we are using a PlayStation 3, and fantastic, it's there. Your home screen shows up as you'd expect. So the only way I then do is let's make this widescreen and screen, and in fact let's make it full screen, because again we're going to screen capture the whole screen, and that's where the problem lies. So you can see the mouse is moving around, but we can't see the options on the recording footage here. And also you'll notice that the screen's frozen, so you'll still hear the audio in the background, although it might be a bit quiet for you in this video. It is still running, so I was still able to operate the game, as well as the whole computer, so the settings and everything like that. But unfortunately, when I came back to look at the footage, nothing that I had saved had saved. The screen had frozen, only leaving the audio. So I thought, well, maybe that's a PlayStation issue. Again, it's got your encryption on there to stop people from recording Blu-rays and stuff like that, so maybe it was part of that. So I went over and I plugged in my Wii console into the HD converter, because I'm just using composite cables. So as you can see, I thought, well, let's just boot up OBS to see if it runs through there, and again just messing around with the settings, but you can see Mario running in the background, and it was able to run with no issues there, although it looks a bit blurry and the colors are off a bit, because again I think that's because it's going through the composite cables, and they're not particularly good, to be honest with you. But it's working, so I thought, well, let's switch back whilst the gameplay's running, and whilst the screen is recording properly. Let's switch back to the Genki app, and let's see if it will now let me actually continue to record, and let's hope that it actually works properly. So we're going to close OBS, reopen the Genki app, and continue on with recording. And unfortunately, you can see straight away from the video here, the screen is completely frozen. Now again, whilst I was doing this, I didn't realize the screen had frozen, because I could still continue to play the game just like normal. So unfortunately, there is no way to capture the footage through the Genki app, not natively like there should be, and also not by screen recording either. So with that aside, let's go ahead and look at OBS and see if that will at least give us a method of capturing our gameplay. Okay, so let's jump into this. Obviously we are running the PS3 here and MotorStorm, and as you can see, actually seems to work rather well. So through OBS software, we're not facing an issue with the PS3 encryption, and everything seems to be running smoothly. Again, we're at 1080p, and I can't actually tell. I assume this is 30 frames per second. It should only be outputting at 30 frames per second, but the gameplay is smooth and looks great. So I also wanted to test out to see if there's any latency in this device in terms of button presses, and I thought, what better game than Street Fighter? And I was again pleased to say, running through OBS, using the screen or the preview, I couldn't see any latency issues. Everything felt smooth and crisp, although I'm not that good or a bit out of practice at Street Fighter 2, it seems. So this is the SNES running again as an emulator through the PS3. So very impressed with PS3 performance. I'm going to continue to just test another game on the emulator here to see again for latency. And here we're going with the original Super Mario Brothers, or the enhanced version on the SNES. And again, a great game to test for latency in terms of button presses. And I could not find any issues. Again, I'm a little bit out of practice with how Mario moves in this version, as it's a little bit floaty from what I remember. However, I believe that is accurate to the SNES console. So again, very impressed. And audio sounds clear and crisp and loud and perfect. There's no issues with VSync or any scaling issues. This is running as it would be if the PS3 was plugged straight into my console. So very pleased with this performance here. And I did tinker around with some settings on OBS, but I didn't need to do too much, to be honest with you. This ran smoothly straight from the get-go, and that is something that we will see throughout the rest of the videos, to be honest. As I'll move over to looking at the Wii. Again, this is going to be the Wii running through the HD converter, so not the best video performance here, but that's due to the cables and the converter, not necessarily the capture device. So again, this is one running absolutely fine. There was no latency that I could feel, and no audio issues, no video issues other than the cables being slightly worse than I would have liked. So again, very happy with this. And you could probably tinker with the settings in terms of the color performance here. I was content with what I could see from a test. If I was going to record an actual video or further or stream, I'd probably play with some of the contrast and hue and those color settings in OBS, which you can do, and you can set up a profile, and it should be all fine, to be honest with you. What we're going to now do is, staying with the same box, we're going to look at the N64. So this is running through the traditional hardware, through the HD converter into the PC, obviously through the capture device. And again, the colors are off a little bit here. Now this is running through S-Video, and actually if I plugged in the S-Video into the converter and then straight into the TV, personally, I think it looks a little bit better than what this capture device is outputting now. So there is something funny going on with the capture for N64 performance. I did try and play with some of the settings. As you can see here, it looks maybe slightly crisper, but still not 100% perfect in terms of the color. I think the contrast is probably a little bit too high. The blurriness is fine, that's to be expected, and that looks as good as it should, but I was a bit upset with some of the contrast and the darks here. Again, this is an underrated game, not GoldenEye, but the other James Bond game, The World Is Not Enough, on the N64, and it looks as good as it probably could running in this setup. However, I'd probably like to tweak the contrast and the darkness here, because the darks probably are popping a little bit too rich for my liking. But action, there's no screen tearing or any problems with actual gameplay here. It's just a brightness thing, to be honest with you. So again, very happy with this. Now it is running in widescreen, which traditionally the N64 didn't do. However, this game did support widescreen, so I thought it was a good one. And this is actually, as I said, an underrated game. Visually, one of the best games on the N64. So quite pleased with the capture of this. Just again would tweak the settings a little bit. So the last thing that we're going to look at here is the Wii U, and similarly to the similarly to the PS3, the way you capture this is just a direct input. Obviously there's no upscaling or messing around with composite or any other type of cables. This is a straight HD input, of course, and here we can see that everything is running as it should be. One of the brightest games, and there's no contrast issues, there's no hue issues, there's no sharpness, or this is pretty much a one-to-one performance here from what you would like to see. So very pleased with how this is performing. And if you saw the other video of the cheap capture device, we were having some real bad problems with screen tearing, specifically on this game, although it was okay on other games. This device, we don't have that problem. So again, yep, very pleased with how this looks and how this performs. So again, we are now going to jump into another game, and this is obviously Smash Brothers, the Wii U version, not the Switch version. And I believe this actually should be running at 60 frames per second through the Wii U even. And I'm not a connoisseur of Smash. I don't know how it's supposed to feel and potentially look. Now on OBS it's running at 1080p and trying to capture at 60 frames per second, but if the device is only outputting 30, it will still say 60, and you just will only get 30 obviously. And I'm not used to Smash, so I couldn't really tell the difference whether this was 60 or 30. It should technically only be 30, but it ran smooth enough for me to not actually be worried about that. And again, there was no latency that I could tell. I'm not the best at Smash, and I don't often play it, but I was pushing the buttons, and Toon Link there was doing what I requested. As you can see, visually it looks fantastic. No issues there either. So we're going to look at one final game here, and then I'll give you my conclusions whilst this gameplay is proceeding. Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze, a game that I'm a bit more familiar with and a bit more used to how it's supposed to run. And again, although it should only be 30 frames per second, this game does run natively at 60. I couldn't actually tell whether this was 30 or 60, so a good thing. Actually very impressed with the performance on this. There was no slowdown or lag or input latency. A bit of a funny game to control with Donkey Kong kind of being a bit more weighty, but like I said, no issues at all. And visually it was actually a little bit blurry than I remember playing previously, but I haven't played it for quite some time, so obviously it does look pretty stunning for a Wii U game, to be honest with you. And hopefully they carry on this series. I know we've had the 2 games now and the 3DS port, but just a fantastic game. So to wrap this up, this video, and my conclusions on this device, the Shadowcast from Human Things, Genki Shadowcast, I have to say that for the price, it's probably worth it. Again, I think if you pre-ordered it, it was $40 American, whatever that converts to in the UK, I can't remember. If you try and buy it now that it's released, they've stuck on an extra $10, so you're looking at $50 for this, and I probably recommend it if you were desperate for a cheap capture device, bearing in mind that it only should be outputting at 30, although I would say that this feels as good as 60 on this game. So yeah, all in all, probably worth it, especially if you're going to use OBS anyway. The only downside is that 30 frames per second, as mentioned, but also the software included, which you are paying for that software. It was marketed that it should be able to do screen capture and streaming, which it doesn't do, as described earlier in the video. So a bit disappointing. I would have preferred maybe if they reduced their price back down to $40 until they fix that. I assume that they can fix their arcade capturing device or software up to scratch. I assume that is fairly easy for them to fix, although they've missed their launch deadline, which is a bit of a shame. And again, if you're on Mac or don't mind using the Chrome browser to do that, there's software that I've seen or been told works as intended. So not all bad, in fact mostly good in terms of the actual capture, especially if you're using OBS or I assume it probably works with other capture software if that's what you're using. I was very happy with this device all in all. So yeah, I would recommend this. However, if you want to be capturing at 60 frames per second, if you want to be capturing at resolutions over 1080p, you're going to need a better device that costs more. But for basics, and certainly for retro consoles or emulation of retro consoles, this does very well. So yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed this video and listening to my mad rambles through this. I will, now I've got this device and it's up and running, I will be outputting a lot more gameplay type videos and my thoughts on different games and comparisons perhaps of different games. So stay tuned and please hit that subscribe button. Catch you next time.